All right. So welcome. A little bit about myself. So I'm Susan Leister. I have more than 20 years of quality experience, and I cover the GXPs. So I cover the GXPs, and so I have a broad knowledge of the clinical, the lab, as well as manufacturing. I've built numerous risk management programs as well as quality programs, and I have global inspection experience as well. So anything from this major update from ICH E6 R2 to R3 that you want to talk about, any of those various topics as we go through them. So the topics that we are covering here in these 2.5 hours, of course, the welcome, then we review our learning objectives for this course, and we will go through the quality management risk-based approach of clinical trials, the monitoring plan and the monitoring trial, as well as the reports, the non-compliance management portion from the revisions, electronic data handling, remote electronic data handling, essential documents, summarize, and take a quick review back at those learning objectives. So all of this is, of course, looking at those revisions. So our learning objectives, our 3 key learning objectives that you should be able to answer by the end of these 2.5 hours. Identify changes that impact sponsors, CROs, and individuals in their roles from R2 to R3. Explain the impact of the revisions on clinical trial conduct as well as overall organizational practices, and discuss opportunities for implementing the revised guideline. Okay, so key questions in summary here that we're going to go through. So why? The principles of GCP, they are, as we all know, designed to be flexible, right? So that it's helpful because they're not a one-size-fits-all, and that's, you know, we just take it and it doesn't dictate every little timeline and everything that we are to do, which I think is very helpful because all of our organizations are different. Some are, you know, very small organizations, and we have very large, big pharma and the larger CROs, and right. So there's all different kinds of organizations. So that's the beauty of having the flexibility of the GCPs. And this update to E6 guideline, along with the ICH E8, which I do want to point out, you did receive those attachments as well with the slides. So these updates encourage us to have thoughtful consideration in planning to address specific and potentially unique aspects of an individual trial. Where's my pointer? I lost my pointer. Okay, the what. So this includes our evaluation of the trial characteristics. So this starts with the study design, right? And I'm sure most of you've been in industry long enough, you have worked on a protocol at whatever capacity it was, whether it was the quality role, the medical affairs, ClinOps, but you've seen a poor study design, and that's part of what this update also, again, focusing on trying to get us to think early on about that design and the design elements so that we can have a better designed protocol from the beginning to address a lot of the issues that the regulators have been seeing. Then also the investigational product being evaluated, the medical conditions that, of course, the trial is to be addressing, characteristics of the participants, the setting which the trial is to be conducted, and the data that we're attempting to and wanting to collect. How? So careful consideration of factors, which they're referring to as the trial quality, including critical to quality factors. They refer to them as acceptance ranges. So I will say in the draft, if you reviewed the draft of R3, they did drop out those quality tolerance limits And then they did put them back in the final version, but they also referred to them as these acceptance ranges. So you'll see both terms, just as FYI. So the dates, so E8 was finalized October 2021, so it's been out there for a while, and I'm sure you've probably read it. And then R3, of course, was finalized in January of 2025, and it has that implementation date. I'll jump to it right here. It's July. There's January 6th was the date. Oh, I have to click the arrow to get to it. Does it have it on here? I believe it's on the other page. I don't think we have it. So it's a July date that they have put out for, let me see, do we have it here? Maybe we don't. Okay, so it's a July date, so it's usually like 6 months later. And all the various countries have not, at least not that I've seen, adopted it officially yet. That's in the process. That's what's happening right now. So throughout these next few hours, we are going through a high-level overview of the drivers and changes for R3. GCP practices. I'm sure all of you are also familiar with this, but I'd like to mention it because sometimes I do have folks that are also newer to clinical trials, so I'd like to just have a few of these in here. So the Declaration of Helsinki from 1964 was written and adopted in response to World War II war crimes, and here we had that set of ethical principles regarding research involving human beings, and it had the core principles that were adopted into ICH GCP. And then, of course, we have our International Council for Harmonization of Technical Requirements for Pharmaceuticals for Human Use, which, of course, I always just say ICH because to me this is a tongue twister to keep saying this over and over again. So the GCPs today, they're international ethical and scientific quality standards for clinical practices. So they include covering all of these steps: designing, conducting our trials, the monitoring of the trials, ensuring safety and welfare of participants, as well as data integrity, auditing the study, recording the data, analyzing the data, and then finally reporting all the way to archiving of the data. So just looking at this regulatory pathway, here we have our R2 back in November 2016, which was also a big update to GCP. And then shortly thereafter, I mean just a few months, we immediately turned over to this, we need to look at this again. And that was in January 2017. And they started moving to R3 principles, and this moved forward into April of 2021, and then it kept moving forward even through COVID, right? They were still working on some progress, and they had R3 with the annex, and there are 3 annexes with R3, and so kind of running in parallel a little bit afterwards of R2, then we had E8 that came into play, the revision R1, and that came out in, they started working on this May of 2019, and here we have it finalized a few years later. So these updates, where they started updating quality by design, principles, things of that nature, that also fed into, because they of course want alignment of all of these guidelines, so that was feeding into what we now have in R3, so that you have synchronization, shall I say, and an alignment of R1 and R3. So, and then of course here we have now our finalized version of R3 in January of 2025. So just a saying I like to share here, forget quality as you know it, right? This was feedback from the EMA meeting of E8R1 and E6R3 to City, and the head of inspections from EMA back in 2020. So just, I found that very interesting and wanted to share that.